Right in front of our eyes, they're losing ads day by day. Their profit margins are going down. They're trying to convert to a web presence. On the web, you're as big as that screen in front of you. That's it. And so we have been handed, I don't want to fetishize the web and go on and on excessively about what a really wonderful instrument it is, but it is a leveler, a great leveler. And I think when you come to things like the Ron Paul campaign and the spread of useful information, it's a fantastic thing, and maybe you're a more optimistic crowd, being called libertarians, than the left. The left is always inclined to look on the grim side of things. Always inclined to look on the grim side of things. The cup is always half empty, until you point out, look, it's half full, it doesn't look so bad. And they say, oh, no, 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 half empty. You say, look, suddenly, when I began doing press criticism for the Village Voice in the 70s, if you wanted to find out about the Middle East, anything other than the line being peddled by the Jerusalem correspondent of the New York Times, you had to run along the road to Ho Tailing's out-of-town newspaper store on Times Square, which was a fun place. It had every foreign newspaper on the planet. You then get some Middle Eastern newspaper or pamphlet, and then you'd rush back to the office, try and copy it, or try and get someone to, faxes didn't really come in until 1972, to read you what the French newspaper was saying. It was that bad to get. There was a heroic figure called Israel Shahak. Some of you may be familiar with him. He lived in Jerusalem. He's a professor of inorganic chemistry at Hebrew University. He used to translate the Hebrew language press, which were the newspapers which really said what was going on. The Jerusalem Post didn't have a word of truth in it from start to finish. That was for English readers. If you wanted to find out what was actually happening in the territories, you had to read the Hebrew language press, which Israel would do, and he would translate it into English. Put it on an old-fashioned Gestetner, the one that always made your fingers turn purple, run it off on the Gestetner and mail it off to 50 people. Nowadays, you can go online and there's the English language Haaretz. There's probably 30, 40 websites which will give you the truth of what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Lebanon. Good stuff, quite apart from what we run or what antiwar.com might run. So in terms of information, in terms of accessibility, there's a fantastic difference, and everybody's reading it. You can go to crowds now and say, if you're talking to an ordinary group, and say, how many people here are online, and every hand will go up, whether the person's, 12 or 80. This is a big, big difference, and it's to our advantage. So that's point one, the good news there. Now, we're at a kind of a median point in this election year. In fact, for those of you who may have missed it, Hillary Clinton finally conceded this morning. In the National Building Museum down the road. Turns out she's got a really big campaign debt, believe it or not. So there we are at the median point. So let's look a little back at what happened and where we're at. From the left point of view, I think the left has been pretty insignificant. Hate to say it. The anti-war movement, the country is anti-war. There's absolutely no question about that. The left anti-war movement is ineffective and almost imperceptible. A few brave souls, do good things, make demonstrations, but as a collective, coercive force, not at all. When was their moment of maximum purchase? Their moment of maximum purchase is when the Democrats had recovered the Congress and were clinging to pretty small majorities. Did they go then and say, we place you on notice. We place you on notice that unless you really move to stop voting the money for war, vote after vote, you're going to face the sanction at the polls. Well, there were some sit-ins done by Medea Benjamin and her crowd, but that moment was lost. They wouldn't go when the congressman from Pennsylvania said, pull out right now. They didn't go with him. When you looked at the left-wing sites, the Democratic sort of organizing sites, there was no real clear line drawn in the sand. So that opportunity was squandered. So that when we come to the primary season, we had Kucinich wasting his time and everybody's time with a clearly doomed candidacy from day one. Doomed. We kept saying, why are you doing this? Build up a presence in the Hill if you want to do something useful. Kept at it. I think sheer vanity myself. And then now you have Ralph. I respect Ralph a lot for some things he's done, though I'm a big fan of the Corvair. A perfectly good car. I hope there's at least a few lonely members of the Corvair Club here. Do I see any hands? I do. I see 2 hands. Good, good, good. I said to Ralph, I said, Ralph, you were wrong about the Corvair. He said, I've never been wrong about anything. He did. This was 3 weeks ago. I said, that's the most terrible thing I ever heard a human being say. Anyway, so where's Ralph? He was in Portland, Oregon the other day. He had a crowd of 45 people. In Portland, Oregon. Another waste of time. And so we have Obama. Well, before that, we had Ron Paul. It was inspiring to me when I regularly drive from Humboldt County, Northern California, otherwise known as the Emerald Triangle, north up to Olympia. Then early on, and then I went to, up into Seattle. And you saw early on Ron Paul signs all the way up the road. Only signs there, by the way, at that point. So you could see something was happening. And we at Counterpunch were on board for Paul. Not all of our readers. I said Paul was fine with me. If he moved into the Oval Office tomorrow, it'd be great. There was a lot of shock. Mind you, I displayed a certain enthusiasm for Huckabee, too, which shook him up. But I liked his jobs program. You guys wouldn't like jobs programs, but I liked building an extra lane on the I-95. That was kind of tough talk. I like that. I don't live in Florida. Who cares? Build 5 new lanes. But you felt, and there I think, simply he incarnated the spirit of mutiny. The basic spirit of mutiny. He was for every little guy when he stood up there in the debates and staked out the position which was clear and uncompromising. And it was terrific. I differ slightly at the moment when Justin spent quite a lot of time slashing away at reason and all that. I think there were some difficulties did surface. I know that at Counterpunch we had some tough questions about positions on immigration, on gay people, and on black people, which were, difficult given some of those memos, and I think it could have been a little bit better dealt with. I think it did take a certain spark out of the Paul campaign. And I think if one's considering, well, it's what's past is past, I think Paul fought a great fight, no question about it. And one of the main things was his absolutely obvious and visible integrity, which shines forth. You know an honest guy when you've seen one. It's very rare. I remember once seeing, very rarely do you hear a politician say something that really shakes you up by its seemingly suicidal honesty. I remember Senator Harold Hughes of Iowa. Some of you may remember him. He was a former truck driver who became a pretty good senator from Iowa about 20, 25 years ago. And at one point he was being touted as a possible, I think he was Democratic, contender for the nomination. And he was on CBS.